No matter what happens to Star Citizen, development continues across the studio, and I'm here to provide you with a monthly peek at the process. Ship refineries, salvage missions, new ships, and more. These are the highlights of Star Citizen development in the month of March. It's been a crazy couple of weeks for me. We just arrived back in Turkey, so this one is a bit late. But if you enjoyed this update and want one every month, consider subscribing to the channel, and check out the past 24 monthly reports in the playlist link down below. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. As with every month, we start our updates with the AI tech teams. To get started, the teams have made significant improvements to AI navigation tools, allowing for navigation meshes to be generated across more narrow and complex areas, such as vents underneath and in between the rooms of space stations and ground locations. Time was also spent polishing NPC abilities to push and interact with cargo trolleys as well as transit systems and elevators. Best of luck to them. On to the art segment, we're diving straight into spaceships. The UK vehicle team closed out the Argo SRV tugboat that's sure to introduce vehicle tractor beams later this year. They also finished up 2 unannounced vehicles. I don't think we know what either of these are just yet. The Misk Hull C continued undergoing polish, and progress on the Crusader Spirit series Laud 0 phase continued. Laud 0 is the highest level of detail a ship reaches in the gray box phase, determining all geometry and clearances before textures and lighting get their work. White box work also began on 2 more unannounced vehicles, and those component bay changes to the Freelancer mentioned back in February continued. The gray box phase for a new vehicle approached completion, and assuming this is a vehicle and not a ship as they said, it is likely the RSI Lynx, which was recently reported to be finishing up its gray box phase and is not seen referred to anywhere else in this segment, which is why this is a new vehicle and not an unannounced one. Finally, gray box on the Santok Yai continued, focusing mainly on the landing gear, making sure they have the correct look of power, and the wings, which are also pretty intricate. We'll likely see this ship releasing for Alien Week this summer. In the engine department, the physics team has been working on creating consistent handling of wheeled vehicles when transitioning between gravitational fields, something that plagues vehicles and players alike. While more code was refactored to continue the Gen 12 transition in rendering tech, no mention of Vulkan API progress was made this month. On the core engine side, that remote shader compiler we've been hearing about over and over this year received a final round of performance improvements. Hopefully we'll notice the implementation of this compiler into the workflow and engine. The remainder of the engine's team was spent working on Alpha 318. In March, the Arena Commander features team saw the first stage of the Arena Commander rework move to game dev. Game dev is part of the build process used to keep the game updated and also relatively stable. I go over it in detail in my most recent video for supporters. All members right here on YouTube can check that video out on the homepage right now if you want. Now, besides that plug, all race courses have been updated with their appropriate checkpoint indicators, and work continues on LS3 and Defford Link racetracks. The character features team spent some time repurposing some of the new EVA animations for prone locomotion. For example, instead of spinning around like a top when turning in prone, a character will roll over on the spot, replacing the Q and E button we use for rolling over at the moment. The weapon features team supported new behaviors for weapon heating, such as overheat. Like many games, this would require something akin to a reload to reset values. But this setting also allows weapons to change fire modes as they approach the overheat period, as was described here enthusiastically by one of the devs of the upcoming Volt weapons, likely where this tech will be introduced later on.
So it's gonna start out being like a projectile shooting weapon as you start firing. It will then evolve into a beam. So it'll start out with a tug, 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 where you have the beam, and it also has the potential for overheating. So
personally, my strongest experience with this will always be the various Halo weapons that, in my opinion, lead the pack in effects. On the gameplay side of things, the features team supported ongoing QATRs for mining and tractor beams, both scheduled for major updates in 3.19 that I covered just this last week. Linked down below. These efforts led to some quality of life improvements like a tractor beam toggle and improved AR markers. They also began design and engineering work on ship refineries. At this point, I can't be sure if this refers to large-scale mineral and fuel refineries like on the Expanse and the Odyssey, or purpose-built refineries like on the 100 series. I'm leaning towards the former, as I believe this is gameplay they would like to have quickly after Pyro is released. This would be yet another industrial profession coming into the game, a major method for players to work together in mining and tractor beams, and a great way to round out industrial gameplay after the recent additions we've already seen. We'll have to keep a close eye on refining gameplay in the next several months. The missions team worked on salvage contract polishing and cargo extraction missions, which offer exploration and cargo gameplay using soft death derelict ships in a packaged mission form for new players. That ship escort mission we've been hearing about, which requires you to accompany an NPC throughout the star system in quantum travel, is continuing work as well, likely due to release sometime after quantum travel has been updated. And a new mission based on stealing data began production. Some quality of life improvements were worked on for 3.19, such as historical data on the missions you've passed or failed and why. Other mission improvements include modularizing the missing persons missions that we have in caves to be used in conjunction with other mission types, though that doesn't seem planned for 3.19. The team also continued to work on a system that allows players to reliably defend their ship's interiors from trespassers. In March, the graphics team completed a version of the tech behind jump point tunnels. Various shader improvements for characters were made for melanin controls and initial support for makeup and tattoos. Meanwhile, the VFX programming team continued to work on quantum travel and fire-related features. Amongst the improvements is the ability for entities to exchange heat with the volume or room that they reside in. The Planet Tech team progressed on their work, bringing water up to modern standards for water simulation, which are much better in other games than they are in Star Citizen right now. They also increased the shape and distribution of asteroids. In the EU teams on the location side, Ruin Station saw a bit of focus, particularly in traversal options and how new gameplay elements can be included in the location. Keep in mind, while this is a space station, it's also the sole landing zone in Pyro, so it takes the place of New Babbage, Orison, Lorville, or Area 18. And while it won't be friendly to all like those cities are, it will be an expansive play area with mission givers, shops, back alleys, habs, and more. So a lot of work will continue to go into this location that will be used for others like it in the future. The team also progressed on local law offices in Stanton, where players will bring their prisoners after returning from the field as a bounty hunter. The locations team also worked alongside the USPU team on the cargo freight elevators. EU2 worked with the missions team to add new platforms to Orison for additional mission locations. Content packs 2 and 3, which contain a lot of art assets for the new outposts we've watched in progress throughout development, are wrapping up soon, which means outpost distribution in Pyro and hopefully redistribution in Stanton can begin. The jump point locations in Stanton are also almost complete. Work also continued on underground facilities and the new Rocky Caves rework, as well as bringing previously finished work on Pyro planetary assets up to the standard of all this new tech. The narrative team is starting to have some fun too. For Pyro, the lore was revisited to ensure consistency with in-game designs, and territories began to be drawn out across the system to define where each gang might be more common, which space they're going to decide to defend, and where conflict zones will be. They also began fleshing out the outlaw lifestyle, which may be their name for what most people think of as piracy. They're aiming to define a new, more nuanced way to drift into criminality gameplay and lifestyle, rather than just immediately receiving shady contracts. This should help new players avoid getting roped into bad deals, make the pacing of outlaw gameplay a bit better, and also make more sense considering how criminals act in real life anyways. This could be a very big deal because outlaw gameplay is going to be a large part of Star Citizen, but will also be very contentious. I think it's important that they are very clear and give a lot of warning signs to players that they are drifting into these styles of gameplay, and that the missions they're looking at might get them into a rough situation. The team also continued developing mission text for salvage, investigation, mining, and other missions that have yet to be announced. And that does it for the highlights on this report. And unfortunately, with the craziness that has been my last 2 weeks, we didn't get a chance to go over this one in detail on stream. But I think a lot of work has been dedicated to 318, and many resources continue to focus on Squadron 42. So for the first time this year, I'll say we are coming off a rather slow monthly report. But there was still a lot to consider here. The changes to criminality, mentions of refineries, and all this news about new missions are definitely good things to keep track of. And if you want to keep up with the latest news and upcoming features in Star Citizen for the rest of the year, you can subscribe here. And check out the playlist link down below to see every other month of Star Citizen's development over the last couple years. As always, I hope you learned something new in this one, and I'll catch you in the next.